The following Monday, Vail Industries felt transformed. Not polished, not perfect, but different. The fear that had once settled in the corners of every cubicle, every meeting room, had begun to lift. It wasn't replaced with blind optimism, but with something rarer, dignity. Alina walked the floors without entourage, greeting employees by name. Some still looked surprised to be acknowledged. Others smiled back, slowly trusting this wasn't temporary. By noon, she stood before a gathering of over 400 employees in the main auditorium. No stage, no spotlights, just a microphone, a simple black dress, and a truth she was ready to say out loud. "I know I don't look like what most of you expect from a leader," Alina began. "A few days ago, I served coffee in your meetings. I walked past in the halls, and most of you didn't look twice." She paused, letting the silence settle. "I didn't do that to test you. I did it because I wanted to understand who we are, without the polish, without the power suits, without titles. What I saw was a company in survival mode, not just morally, but structurally." She moved closer to the edge of the platform. "You saw what happened last week. You saw who walked out and who was walked out. But this isn't about revenge. It's not even about punishment. It's about course correction. Culture doesn't change with memos or slogans. It changes when people are held accountable and when those who've been ignored are finally heard." In the second row, a young woman who had once been brought to tears by Dorian's mockery clutched a notebook to her chest, her eyes shining. Alina continued, "This company was never meant to be a kingdom, and I was never meant to be its queen. I am here as a steward, a protector, a builder, and you're all part of that." The applause started tentatively. Then it grew, not thunderous, not choreographed, but honest. Later that day, Alina returned to her office. Her inbox overflowed with messages, some from executives expressing their support, some from interns simply thanking her for seeing them. A few messages came from people she'd let go, some angry, some quietly acknowledging she was right. That evening, she sat in the empty boardroom, where it had all begun. No cameras now, no hidden recordings, just her, a notepad, and her father's old pen. She wrote, "Legacy isn't about who gets the credit. It's about who takes responsibility when no one else will, and who's willing to lead when it would be easier to disappear." She closed the notebook and looked around the room. No one would ever mock a maid in here again. No one would ever mistake cruelty for charisma. And no one, ever again, would underestimate the quiet person in the room. By week's end, Vail Industries no longer felt like Dorian's kingdom. Gone were the sharp-tongued directives shouted across hallways, the fear-driven meetings, the hushed conversations in elevators. In their place came pause, reflection, uncertainty, hope. Alina moved through the building not as a specter in a maid's uniform, but as a leader, one whose presence turned heads and silenced whispers. Not because she demanded fear, but because she commanded respect. The first to be summoned to her new executive office was Gavin Locke, head of operations and Dorian's most loyal enforcer. He entered confidently, assuming his charm and tenure would shield him. "Alina, Ms. Vail," he corrected quickly. "Pleasure, of course. I imagine we've got some misunderstandings to clear up." She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Without responding, a neat folder waited beside her. Inside, a printed copy of an email chain. Gavin's name was on every message, laughing off an intern complaint, mocking a junior analyst who quit in tears. Dozens of instances. Patterns, not mistakes. Alina's tone was even, unemotional. "This company doesn't protect people who cause harm. You're being terminated, effective immediately." Gavin stood, stunned. "Come on. I was joking. You know how things are around here. This is how we worked under Dorian." She looked up. "Exactly." Security met him at the elevator. No anger, no spectacle, just silence and an ending. The next day, 2 department heads were released, one for fraud, the other for cover-ups. Another resigned quietly before his name even reached her desk. Alina didn't chase drama. She didn't grandstand. She simply acted, and the company began to shift, Some employees still tiptoed, unsure where the winds would blow. But others, particularly the junior staff and long-overlooked contributors, began to breathe a little easier. There were small things at first, people speaking up in meetings, someone asking a question without being laughed at, smiles in the hallway. Marla Chun, the general counsel, stopped by one evening as Alina was still at her desk, reviewing policies line by line. "You're not just cleaning house," Marla observed. "You're rewriting it." Alina didn't look up. The house was built wrong to begin with. Marla leaned against the doorway. "You're not afraid of being disliked, are you?" Alina smiled faintly. "Respect is earned. Fear is borrowed. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to do what no one else had the courage to do." She paused. "But that doesn't mean I'm not listening." That night, she sent out her first company-wide memo, not filtered through PR or assistants. Just her words, sent directly to every member of Vail Industries. "I've spent months working alongside you in silence. I've watched who you are when you think no one's watching. Some of what I've seen was painful. Some of it gave me hope. This company will change. That change will not be perfect, but it will be real. If you're a part of the problem, your time here is ending. If you're here to build something better, your time is just beginning." Alina Vail. The email lit up inboxes like a flare in the night. Some replied instantly. Others silently reflected. A few cleared out their desks the next morning without waiting to be told. By the end of the week, the company had lost 6 executives, but gained something far rarer: clarity. Alina stood in her father's old office that Friday evening, hands resting lightly on the windowsill. Below, the city pulsed on. Above, the sky had begun to soften with the colors of dusk. One by one, she had removed the voices that mocked, silenced, corrupted. But she wasn't building her father's company again. She was building something her father never dreamed of, and she hadn't even started yet. The boardroom, once a stage for Dorian's theatrics, now held a different weight. Quiet, taut, almost reverent. Alina sat composed, fingers laced on the table, her gaze never wavering. She wasn't just delivering a message. She was executing a plan. The air shifted as the company's general counsel, Marla Chun, entered, clutching a briefcase. "I've reviewed the documents," Marla said without waiting for permission. Alina Vail holds verified equity, power of proxy from silent partners, and majority board support to initiate executive changes. She met Dorian's eyes, then turned to Alina. All authority is legally sound. Dorian let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "So this is how you play it? You sneak in like a rat, spy on us, and now what? Dismantle everything." "No," Alina said quietly. "Just the parts that are rotten." She clicked the laptop again. A new set of files opened. Internal complaints, HR reports, emails with buried harassment accusations, unjust terminations, manipulation of funds. All roads led back to Dorian and the men who enabled him. She looked to the board. "Item 1, she said. Motion to remove Dorian Vail from his position as CEO. Gasps. A few heads turned to each other. One board member, the oldest, a man named Lowell Crane, cleared his throat. "I second the motion." Alina nodded. "Let's vote." Hands raised, one by one. Some reluctantly, some with a strange sense of relief. Only Dorian's hand stayed down. Motion passes. Effective immediately. Alina said. Dorian stood up, chair scraping loudly. "You can't do this." "You're no longer CEO, Mr. Vail," Marla replied. "Please refrain from disrupting the proceedings." He laughed, but there was no confidence in it now. Only venom. "This place will fall without me." Alina stood. "No, it fell because of you. Now we'll learn to rise again." Security waited just outside the door. No spectacle. No cuffs. Just a silent escort as Dorian walked out without a final word. His silence louder than any protest could have been. Alina turned back to the others. "I know what you're thinking, that I've just played the ultimate revenge card. But that's not what this is." She opened a new document, a proposal. This company was built by vision. My father had it. Dorian destroyed it. Now we begin again, with transparency, with ethics, and with leaders who understand that power is a responsibility, not a trophy. Several board members leaned forward, intrigued despite themselves. Alina continued, "Everyone who stood by silently while abuse flourished, your actions are being reviewed. Some of you will step down. Others will have a chance to prove you can lead differently." She turned to Lowell. "You'll be interim CEO until the board agrees on a permanent replacement." He nodded solemnly. "You have my support, Ms. Vale." She smiled faintly. "That's not what I want. I want your accountability. Support should come from your actions, not your words." The meeting continued. Names were called. Files reviewed. 2 more executives were dismissed for misconduct. 3 others were formally warned. It wasn't chaos. It was controlled justice, swift, clear, and long overdue. By the end of the hour, the company had changed, not fully, not perfectly, but undeniably. As the boardroom emptied, Alina remained seated, alone now, staring out over the city skyline. The maid was gone. In her place stood the rightful heir, not by birthright, but by clarity, by strength, and by choice. Tomorrow would not be easy, but tomorrow was hers. The night air was cooler than expected for mid-July. The city buzzed below in neon veins, unaware of the quiet fury rising in the heart of one of its tallest towers. She walked briskly through the underground parking garage, her uniform jacket folded neatly over one arm. No longer the quiet maid. She moved with a different rhythm now, measured, deliberate, unafraid. A black sedan waited near the exit, engine purring, windows tinted. As she slid into the back seat, the driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Evening, Miss Alina." She nodded. "Home, please." The car glided into traffic. Alina Vale leaned back and exhaled slowly, letting the silence wash over her like rain on scorched ground. The sting of the afternoon still clung to her skin, not because of the words spoken, but because of who had spoken them. Dorian Vale, her half-brother. He didn't know. He didn't recognize her. To him, she was just another servant, one more background figure in a world built to orbit his ego. He'd forgotten the girl who once shared his father's library, the one who watched quietly as her father praised Dorian for achievements that were never as remarkable as they seemed. She had stayed away when their father died, watching from the back pew of the funeral, while Dorian stood front and center, basking in legacy. The will had been clear. Alina was granted silent equity, a trust fortified 28% of Vale Industries, with full voting rights and executive authority, should she ever choose to claim them. For years she hadn't. She had studied, traveled, watched the company from a distance. But 3 months ago, she'd stepped through the doors of Vale Industries not as a shareholder or heir, but as a maid. No announcement, no entitlement. She needed to see them, all of them, for who they truly were. Today, Dorian had made that task very, very easy. Alina reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were neatly printed observation notes, behavior logs, copied emails, and staff memos. A private investigator had helped her piece together the rot behind the boardroom polish. Dorian had restructured the company to consolidate power, cut pensions, and discard employees like used paper. And everyone laughed along, just like they laughed today. But tomorrow, she wouldn't be invisible. She pressed the intercom. "Sam, change of plan." "Yes, miss." "Stop by the family office. I need the legal documents prepared. First thing tomorrow morning." There was a pause. Understood. The sedan turned, heading uptown toward the quiet stone building that had once been her father's private sanctum, now hers. Back in the conference room, no one had noticed a small camera embedded in the ceiling light. Alina had installed it herself weeks ago. She would review the footage tonight, not to save revenge, but to confirm character. She didn't intend to humiliate anyone. She intended to remove them. The car pulled up to the private driveway. She stepped out and looked up at the old building. Its windows were dark, but something inside had awakened. Tomorrow, the board would meet again. And this time, the maid would sit at the head of the table. The conference room glowed with artificial light, a sleek space of glass, steel, and ambition. Around the long walnut table sat the city's finest minds, executives in tailored suits, Phone silence, but fingers twitching with emails and pending deals. At the head of the table, reclined in a custom Italian leather chair, was Dorian Vale, the millionaire CEO of Vale Industries. Dorian was the kind of man who didn't walk into a room. He arrived, charismatic, sharp-jawed, and devastatingly self-assured. He commanded attention without needing to raise his voice. His fortune had grown like wildfire over the past decade, built on a blend of risk, arrogance, and sheer willpower. He relished power like a gourmet savored wine, slowly, possessively, and always with an audience. The room quieted as he stood, clicking his pen. "Let's begin," he said, scanning the room with a practiced smirk. "This quarter's numbers are impressive. Thanks to most of you, some of you will discuss privately." Murmurs and nervous laughter followed. The tension was sharp enough to slice paper. Then the door opened. A young woman stepped in quietly, holding a tray of coffee. She was dressed plainly, black slacks, white blouse, her hair pinned back with careful neatness. No one knew her name. She wasn't part of the meeting. She was the maid, or, as some whispered, the invisible girl. She moved from person to person, her steps near silent, placing cups gently, her eyes never rising above chest level. Her presence should have gone unnoticed. But Dorian noticed everything. Well, he drawled, eyeing her as she reached his end of the table. "Look who's decided to join the big leagues." She paused, the cup in her hand trembling slightly. The silence in the room turned brittle. Dorian grinned, gesturing to the room. "Gentlemen, this is what I call executive ambition." She must have thought the coffee run was her ticket to upper management. Laughter erupted, uneasy, sycophantic. A few tried to look away. One man, the CFO, chuckled so hard he spilled his own cup. The maid's face remained blank, but something behind her eyes shifted. Something slow, unreadable. She said nothing. She simply placed a final cup before Dorian, gave a brief nod, and turned to leave. But Dorian wasn't done. "Wait," he said, standing again. "You missed someone." "Oh, right, it's you. You're beneath needing coffee." A louder laugh followed. She paused mid-step, but didn't look back. Dorian waved dismissively. "Go on, Cinderella. There's no ball here." The door clicked shut behind her, and the room resumed as if she had never existed. But one person, Marla Chun, the sharp-eyed head of legal, didn't laugh. She glanced at the closed door, her brow furrowed. She didn't know the girl's name either. But something about the way she'd left, not angry, not embarrassed, just still, unsettled her. The rest of the meeting continued. Dorian praised, scolded, threatened raises and firings, his energy theatrical and calculated. By the end of the hour, deals were made, futures decided, and careers tilted in new directions. But no one mentioned the maid again. Outside, the sun began to set behind the mirrored skyline, casting the city in golden reflection. Inside, the conference room dimmed as lights were turned off and chairs pushed back into place. The meeting was over, but something had already begun.